The glass tilted slowly, deliberately. Dark red wine cascading down the front of a white wedding dress like a wound that couldn't be taken back. The woman holding the glass smiled. Not the smile of someone who had made a mistake. The smile of someone who thought they had one. "You should have known better than to bring this kind of thing to our street," she said. The bride didn't cry, didn't flinch, didn't raise her voice. She simply looked at the woman and said, very quietly, "Thank you." Nobody in that backyard understood what she meant. Not yet. Before we go further, drop a comment telling me where in the world you're watching from. And make sure you subscribe because tomorrow's story will leave you absolutely speechless. The morning of the wedding had started the way all perfect days pretend to. Soft light filtering through linen curtains. The smell of gardenias arranged in mason jars along the kitchen windowsill. A handwritten checklist on the counter with almost every box already ticked. Camille Osei stood in the upstairs bathroom of the house she and her husband Marcus had spent 3 years saving to buy, pressing her grandmother's pearl earrings carefully into place. The dress was vintage-inspired ivory, fitted at the waist with a skirt that moved like water. She had found it in a small bridal boutique after 7 months of searching. Marcus appeared in the doorway, already dressed, already watching her with the expression he reserved for moments he didn't want to forget. "You look like the answer to every question I've ever asked," he said. Camille laughed and turned back to the mirror. "Save it for the vows," she told him. Their backyard had been transformed over the past week. String lights draped between old oak trees. White chairs arranged in 2 careful rows on the grass. A floral arch at the far end, built by Marcus's mother over 2 full days, covered in garden roses and eucalyptus. 40 guests were expected. Family, close friends, people who had watched them build something real together over the years. Their neighbor across the fence, 73-year-old Estelle Gaines, had been baking since 5 in the morning. Her pound cake sat cooling on their kitchen counter, and she herself moved between the garden and the back door, arranging things, humming softly to herself, refusing to be told she had already done enough. "Your mama would have loved every inch of this," Estelle told Camille, smoothing the back of her veil with careful, loving hands. Camille's throat tightened. Her mother had passed 2 winters ago. The veil had been hers. "She's here," Camille said softly. "I can feel her." Guests began arriving at noon. Laughter rose from the garden. Children chased each other between the chair rows. Someone had connected a speaker to a playlist Camille had spent 3 weeks building, and old soul music drifted warm and low over the yard. Nobody saw the woman watching from behind the fence until she was already through the gate. Her name was Diane Preller. She had lived 4 houses down for 11 years and considered herself the unofficial standard-bearer of the neighborhood. She was the one who filed the noise complaints. The one who photographed cars she deemed incorrectly parked. The one who had introduced herself to Camille and Marcus when they first moved in by asking, very politely, what they intended to do with the exterior paint. She arrived at the gate with a glass of red wine already in her hand and her phone already recording. "What exactly is going on here?" she announced, loud enough to cut through the music. Heads turned. Conversations fell away. She walked through the gate without being invited, scanning the setup with the expression of someone conducting a formal inspection. Her eyes moved over the guests, the decorations, the catered trays near the back table. "This is a residential street, not an event venue," she said. "Do you people have permits for this? Because there are cars up and down this block and I cannot get out of my own driveway." Marcus stepped forward, his voice measured and calm. "Diane, this is a private celebration on our private property. Our guests parked legally. You're welcome to return to your home." "Your home," she repeated the words with a particular emphasis that made several guests go very still. Camille came to stand beside Marcus. "This is our wedding day," she said. "Please leave us in peace." Diane's eyes moved from Marcus to Camille, to the dress, to the flowers, to the full backyard of people watching her. Something shifted in her expression. A decision being made. "Wedding," she said it like a punchline she hadn't finished setting up yet. Then she lifted the glass. She didn't trip. Her hand wasn't shaking. She poured the wine with the calm precision of someone who had decided exactly what they were going to do and was not going to be talked out of it. The wine hit the ivory dress across the bodice, spread instantly through the delicate fabric, bled into the lace overlay, and soaked down toward the skirt. The garden went completely silent. Camille stood perfectly still. The wine dripped from the beading at her waist. She looked down at her dress, then slowly back up at Diane. "Thank you," she said quietly. Diane blinked. That was not the reaction she had prepared for. "I'm calling the police," Diane announced, pulling out her phone. "There is an illegal gathering, a property disturbance, and I do not feel safe." Estelle Gaines stepped forward from near the flower arch, her whole body radiating 73 years of earned authority. "You just poured wine on a bride at her own wedding, on her own property, and you don't feel safe." "Stay out of this," Diane snapped. "I have lived on this street since before you knew it existed," Estelle replied. "Don't you tell me to stay out of anything." Diane was already dialing. The patrol car arrived in under 4 minutes. Officer Dale Preller stepped out, adjusted his belt, and surveyed the scene with the unhurried confidence of a man who already knew which side he was on. Because Dale Preller was Diane's husband. He had been on the force for 16 years. He had never once, in 16 years, received a formal complaint that had gone anywhere. He had a system, and the system had always protected him. He walked past the guests without making eye contact, moving directly toward Marcus. "Sir, I need you to step back," he said. "Officer, this is my property," Marcus replied. "My wife and I said step back." What happened in the next 90 seconds was captured on 11 different devices. Guests who had pulled out their phones when Diane first arrived never put them away. The footage would later be described by a federal prosecutor as some of the clearest documentation of abuse of authority she had seen in 20 years of legal practice. Dale grabbed Marcus by the arm, spun him, and pressed him face first into the wooden fence along the garden's edge. The sound of impact made Estelle gasp and reach for her chest. The handcuffs came out. Marcus did not resist. Not once. His hands were loose at his sides until they were locked behind his back. "He's not fighting you," Camille said, her voice carrying across the silent garden. "Look at him. He is not fighting you." Dale looked at her with an expression she would describe later on the witness stand as contempt so practiced it had become a reflex. Unless you want to join him, I suggest you be quiet." Diane stood near the dessert table, wine glass replaced by her phone, filming with the satisfaction of someone watching a plan execute perfectly. A younger officer, Thomas Vega, had arrived as backup. He stood near the gate, not moving toward the scene, his hand fidgeting nervously at his side. His eyes moved between Dale and the crowd of guests. Between what was happening and what should be happening. He had been on the force for 8 months. He had already seen enough to know that speaking up came with a serious cost. But he didn't move away from what he was witnessing either. He stood there and watched, and his body camera recorded every single second of it. They moved the ceremony inside. The community hall 2 streets over had been a backup plan Camille had quietly arranged 3 weeks before the wedding. Not because she expected disaster, but because she was the kind of person who understood that being black in America meant having a contingency for joy. The room was plain. Fluorescent lights. Folding chairs arranged quickly by guests who had gone from celebrating to surviving in the space of a single hour. Someone had thought to carry the flower arrangements from the backyard. Someone else had grabbed the speaker. Estelle had, without being asked, retrieved the cake. Camille changed into the backup dress in the hall's small office, a simple white sheath she had bought without ceremony on a Tuesday afternoon. Estelle zipped it up for her and stepped back to look. "Still the most beautiful bride I have ever seen," she said, and her voice only broke a little. When Camille came out, Marcus was waiting. The bruise along his jaw was already darkening. His wrists were marked from the handcuffs. He looked at her the same way he had in the doorway that morning. "They don't get our joy," Camille said, taking both his hands firmly in hers. "Not one piece of it." The officiant, a family friend who had driven 4 hours for this day, stepped forward. The ceremony was shorter than planned. No readings. No processional. Just two people standing in a fluorescent-lit room, surrounded by people who loved them, saying the truest things they knew how to say. When Marcus said for better or worse, his voice did not waver. When Camille said in all battles, she was not deviating from the script. She was reading the one she had been writing her whole life. Estelle's amen shook the walls. The car was waiting for them in the parking lot when they stepped outside. All four tires had been slashed. A single word was keyed deep into the hood in letters large enough to read from 10 feet away. Leave. Marcus photographed every angle before either of them spoke. Old habit. Professional habit. The habit of someone who understood that the moment you stopped documenting was the moment the story became theirs to tell instead of yours. Camille pressed her palm flat against the carved letters. The metal was cool. The edges were sharp. This isn't over, she said quietly. No, Marcus agreed. It's just beginning. What Diane Preller did not know, what Dale Preller had never thought to investigate before making his street an instrument of his contempt, was who exactly they had poured wine on. Who exactly they had handcuffed against a fence in front of 40 witnesses and 11 recording devices. Camille Osei was a senior investigator with the Department of Justice, Civil Rights Division. She had spent the past 2 years building a federal case. Marcus Osei had spent 14 months embedded in this specific neighborhood, documenting a pattern of racially motivated harassment, coordinated abuse of police authority, and systematic suppression of complaints that reached back further than Dale Preller's entire tenure and wider than one single street. They had not moved here by accident. The wedding had not been a coincidence. And Diane Preller, by pouring that wine, had just handed them the most visible, most documented, most undeniable piece of evidence in the entire federal case. The federal warrants were signed 11 days later. The arrest came at dawn. Multiple teams. Multiple locations. All simultaneous. Dale came out of his back door with a go bag and ran directly into Marcus standing in the yard in the early morning quiet, hands loose at his sides. Federal agent, Marcus said. It's over. Dale swung first. He had always swung first. It was the only move he knew. Marcus didn't swing back. He stepped inside the arc of the punch, controlled the arm, and put Dale Preller on the wet grass with the calm efficiency of a man who had been waiting a very long time to do exactly this without once losing his composure. Stop resisting, Marcus said quietly, pressing the cuffs closed. You've done enough. Diane came out the back door in her robe, phone raised, still filming, still narrating herself as the victim of a story she had personally authored from beginning to end. SAC Director Nadia Brennan stepped forward, gold badge catching the early morning light. Mrs. Preller, your husband is under arrest for civil rights violations, evidence tampering, and conspiracy. You are under arrest for obstruction of justice, criminal harassment, and filing false police reports. The phone slipped from Diane's hand. Its screen cracked on the patio stones. Its camera, still running, pointed up at the empty sky. The trial drew national coverage. Hank Okafor, an investigative journalist who had been quietly receiving verified documents for weeks, published the full story the morning of the arrests. Front page. Every major outlet picked it up by noon. By evening it was everywhere. The edited body cam footage Dale had spent years carefully crafting to protect himself became, under federal forensic analysis, the most damning evidence against him. Every gap, every missing minute, every convenient technical malfunction traced back to a specific login at a specific time. Each one was Dale. Every single one. Thomas Vega testified for the prosecution. His body camera footage from the wedding was clear and completely unbroken. He had never deleted anything. He had never been asked to. Nobody had thought he mattered enough to manage. He was offered witness protection and declined. He asked instead to be considered for the department's newly formed oversight unit. The request was granted. Estelle Gaines testified in the dress she had worn to the wedding. She sat in the witness box and described what she had seen with the methodical precision of a woman who had been bearing witness to injustice for 7 decades and was not going to waste a single word. When the prosecutor asked her to describe the moment the wine was poured, she was quiet for a long moment. I have seen a lot of cruelty in my life, she said finally. What I saw that day was a woman who thought humiliating someone at their wedding was a small thing. Something she could do without consequence. She paused and looked at the jury. It was not a small thing. And there were consequences. Dale Preller received 14 years. Diane received 7, plus civil liability that would outlast the sentence by decades. The police chief resigned. Federal oversight teams arrived. The complaint records going back 9 years were reviewed, and what investigators found there opened 4 additional inquiries in neighboring jurisdictions. The neighborhood changed. Not overnight. Not perfectly. But visibly, measurably, in ways that could not be walked back. New oversight policies were put in place. A civilian review board with actual authority began meeting monthly. Community meetings were held where uncomfortable things were finally said out loud by people who had spent years perfecting the art of looking the other way. 3 months after the verdict, Camille and Marcus held a second reception. Same community hall. Transformed again, but differently this time. Not out of necessity, but out of deliberate choice. Because they had decided that the place where they had refused to be broken was exactly the right place to celebrate everything they had built. Camille wore the original dress. The wine stain had not been removed. She had been asked about it by 3 different people before the evening was an hour old. "It's the whole story," she told each of them. "Why would I take it out?" At the end of the night, Marcus and Camille stood together near the door as the last guests filtered out. The string lights swayed overhead. The flower arch from the original backyard, repaired and redressed with fresh roses, stood at the far end of the room. A young journalist who had covered the trial approached them, notebook still in hand even here. "Was it worth it?" she asked. Camille considered the question the way she considered all serious questions. Carefully, without rushing toward an easy answer. "We didn't move here to burn their world down," she said finally. "We moved here to build ours. What happened in between, that was them. Every choice, every act, every moment of cruelty." She glanced down at the stain on her dress. "They gave us all of it. We just made sure it meant something." Outside, the street was quiet. The house 4 doors down sat dark, its windows empty, a foreclosure notice bright against the front door. Inside the hall, the music played on. If this story moved you, leave a like to support the channel and subscribe so you don't miss the next one. I have 2 special stories picked out just for you on the screen right now. Have a wonderful day.